Welcome everyone to the UNM Healthcast. We are here today with the representatives from our Learning Environment Office at the Health Sciences Center. My name is Elizabeth Dwyer, and I will be walking us through a conversation about what exactly a learning environment is, what the office does, and the services and programs that they offer to our health campus community. So first of all, I want to introduce our guests. Diana Martinez is the director of LEO, the Learning Environment Office. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. And then Emma Pettit is the Assistant Director of the LEO office. Thanks for being here today, Emma.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to be here.
So I wanted to chat with you guys a little bit, first off, about what is a learning environment? What does that mean exactly?
Great question. So when thinking about a learning environment, we're really thinking about it as broadly as possible, right? So really like the attitudes, the policies, the practices, the standards, the tone set really both by the institution at the larger level and at the sort of more intimate level, the instructors or the teachers who are engaged with learners, right? So we don't think about it as a specific classroom setting or a specific, sort of clinical setting, but really thinking about it as broadly as possible. Of course, now virtual environments are learning environments. So emails, any interaction between a teacher and a learner.
That makes a lot of sense. And so I happen to be on the back end of when this office was created, so I know a lot about it. But for our viewers who are new to it, what inspired or spurned the creation of this office? Why was it deemed a necessary service?
So we're really born out of the need for the institution to enhance how we were really addressing, reducing, and preventing learner mistreatment, and specifically within medical education. So we are currently not at the HSC level. We are at the School of Medicine. And so there are longstanding external surveys that basically showed that over time, we had both increasing rates of learner mistreatment as well as higher than national average rates of learner mistreatment. And that's both within, so at the medical school for medical students, as well as for residents and fellows who are done with medical school, but still in their medical education journey. And so we come out of really, sort of like a negative space of learning, right? That we have these dynamics that need to be addressed, that previous sort of initiatives to address them were not working, right? We had sort of 10 years history of these increasing rates, enough to really say to the institution, we need to do something different, right? And we need new resources. And ultimately, and I think why this is very specifically placed at the medical school, even though we know it happens unfortunately, mistreatment happens in other learning environments. And I'll make a quick plug that we are looking to expand to the Health Sciences Center, right? So that way we would be a resource for learners in the School of Nursing or College of Nursing, Population Health, Pharmacy. But we had medical education, sorry, let me back up and say, as part of the accreditation process, medical schools are monitored on rates of mistreatment. And so our monitoring, these data were really problematic for both us and our accrediting agencies. And so LEO was born in June of 2019 to say, hey, we need some new, thinking about how we're going to address these concerns. We need some new resources, to funnel into really wanting to turn our ship. And, while we were born from this, I think really sort of like unfortunate negative space of mistreatment, I think that what we're learning is, one, I want to say, while we know we have concerning rates of mistreatment, we by far have amazing teachers and better interactions and really positive interactions happening. It's not just, like rampant mistreatment every which way we look.
Right.
And it's a problem, nationally, right? Like this isn't specific to UNM. This isn't specific to New Mexico or anything like that. And so we've learned, though, I think over the course of almost 2 years now, that yes, while we need to address mistreatment, right, and individual incidents that are reported to our office, and I'm sure we can talk a little bit more about that process, but really it's sort of taking a big step back and looking at, from a systems level perspective of what is working, what is happening when really positive learning environment interactions are happening, and how do we, build skills so that way folks who are really leading those efforts can, sort of one, be highlighted and really acknowledged in their efforts, but then also how do we really use, or I shouldn't say use, but really build the connection so that way they're working with other teachers around them about like, this is what's really working for us. And so we've been able to do, some really, I think, important work in terms of highlighting our exemplary teachers as well as building skills throughout the spectrum, right?
Yeah, I wanted to lean into that a little bit more because obviously being born out of, like you said, a sort of negative space of learner mistreatment, that is part of what your office does, is that you take those, that feedback and that information. And when people, file or sit down with you to, is the language file a report? Is that accurate? Great. To do that, that's something that you do. So that's part of the reactive work of your office. But you've also really leaned into the proactive work to help create positive and helpful and nurturing learning environments on the front end. And so like to essentially help prevent learner mistreatment from occurring in the first place. So if we could talk about some of the proactive services that you offer, and then we can circle back a little bit to let folks know who might be watching this, how they can reach out to you in terms of any reactive services. But let's talk about the proactive stuff first.
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of think of our work in 3 buckets, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we call them attention, prevention, and intervention. And so attention and prevention are both on this sort of proactive side. And then intervention is what we do to intervene in learning environments that are negative or not as positive as they could be, or incidents of mistreatment. So we'll like put that to the side for a minute. And so for attention, a big thing that we do there is shine a spotlight on learning environments that are really positive, on teachers who are really effective. And when we say teachers, we mean not just, faculty, we mean the residents and grad students who are teaching medical students. We mean the staff members, the nurses, everybody else who is teaching residents, fellows, medical students, our graduate students, the techs who teach them, even older, more advanced medical students who tutor ones who are more new to medical school. All of that counts as teachers. And so we try to shine a light on that. We encourage folks to tell us when they've had a moment of exemplary teaching through course evaluations and also just through a button on our website. And we've had a ton of those come in. We've had over 700 different teachers recognized in the less than 2 years that we've had this program open.
Wow.
It's amazing. And one person has been recognized 96 times by 96 learners. So like when Diana said there's really good stuff happening here, we have the numbers to back that up. But so folks write in like, oh, Elizabeth Sandlin taught me so much, like great feedback, really helpful, walked me through this patient. It was wonderful. And so then they tell that to us, and then we tell that to you. We say, hey, Elizabeth, congratulations. Someone said you were exemplary. Here's what they said. And we give them a little like lapel pin to wear that sort of marks you as someone who a learner has said is exemplary. And we have different color pins.
Is it shaped like an apple?
Yeah, it is. Little apple pin. And our pin distribution has been paused in COVID, but it's gonna pop back up again soon. And we have a different color for if you've gotten like a bunch. So that it's a really wonderful program. We've had over 2,000 learners, or over 2,000 times learners have submitted these acknowledgements for over 700 people. So that is really wonderful.
I gotta ask, is the teacher with the 96 individual accolades, do they have like a gold apple pin? Because that sounds like
we were thinking like a whole tree, like just really like a vineyard cover, like full stacked. It should be right, like the military where you just like keep adding and adding and adding stuff to your jacket. I think we should
totally,
for real. And then some of the other, then what we would consider the prevention work that we do is we run a speaker series once a month where we try and help folks build skills around giving feedback, around creating positive learning environments, about talking about things like race that are, very important to have the skills to be able to talk about in the learning environment. Currently, we, in conjunction with the Office of Professional Wellbeing at the School of Medicine, are running a year-long series on trust. What is trust? How to build trust? What are the challenges to building trust? Trust between whom? Why? That's been going super well. Love for more folks to join us there. We're about to launch in the fall a series in conjunction with the HSC Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a 5-part series on gender and gender identity, and creating positive learning environments for folks of all genders and gender identities. So more details on that TBD. So we do stuff like that, and then I would also say, and then I'll stop talking, some of our intervention work is kind of prevention work. So for example, if, I am a teacher in some way and I am reported for the first time for, maybe like snapping at a learner or, not treating them with the kindness and respect that I should have, the LEO intervention there is to give them some feedback and say, like, how can I help you be the best teacher that you can be? So that feedback is really a preventative measure to keep this from happening again. And so our intervention there is just to say, Deanna sometimes says it's like bowling with the bumpers on. So our first level intervention is just to say, like, okay, you hit the bumper, we're gonna flag that for you. And then, like, how can we help you bowl more successfully next time? How can we prevent you from needing this bumper in the future? And so I think sort of all of that together is preventative work, as well as just like running around and doing a bunch of trainings, bystander training, what is mistreatment training, how to report mistreatment training, what does a positive learning environment look like training. We're tired. There's a lot going on.
Sure, absolutely. Never a dull moment at the LEO office. So speaking of all of your services and resources, we'll plug this again at the when we wrap up, but I just want to let folks know, since we're at that point in the conversation and you so artfully dropped your current series that you would love more attendance at, where can people find information? Where can they find you? How can they learn about all of your trainings and services that are available?
And our website is goto.unm.edu/Leo. So that's goto.unm.edu/Leo. But yeah, there's a ton on our website. Our speaker series are the second Monday of every month from 12 to 1. Pre-COVID, it was like, we will serve you lunch, come join us, right? We're not back to that yet. Maybe one day we will be able to sit down in a room and break bread together again. But we've actually had an increased attendance Zoom-wise, which has been interesting than previously. But yeah, they've been great sessions. We've brought in national folks, local folks. It's been really great. So hope people will continue to and join us for the first time as well.
Well, I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on, vaccine hesitancy and things like that. And a lot of the surveys just around like the public interfacing with institutions and organizations has shown a lot of trust issues, frankly. So it's really cool that you guys are doing a series on trust. I think that is a super important subject to lean into right now, because we live in such a world that has such a wealth of information and misinformation, that trust can be a really challenging thing to cultivate. So I think that's really incredible.
That's exactly what really gave us the ideas for hosting this series. And I'll mention our July session is a conversation with Dr. Carissa Colbreth, who's faculty here in the Department of Pathology. She also runs TriCore and has been sort of really at the forefront of, COVID and certainly in New Mexico, but it's also been nationally recognized and has been leading these efforts, but is having a conversation with actually a reporter from the Atlantic, and really talking about how can we build trust between scientists and the community and the media as an intermediary, right? And so that July, I believe, 12th session, I think will be a great one on just exactly what you're talking about.
Sounds really awesome. I will have to put that one on my calendar. Super interested. So because it is part of the work that you do, I would like to touch base on learner mistreatment. We can talk a little bit about, what that looks like and what your office is for in terms of serving learners who are experiencing mistreatment, how they can contact you and access your services. So I'd love to speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start, and then we can share this one. So we, in terms of like what mistreatment is, what it tends to look like, we use the American Association of Medical Colleges definition, which says that mistreatment can be intentional or unintentional. And it has two prongs: that it shows disrespect for the dignity of the learner, and that it interferes with their learning. So it has to do both for it to, what we call, rise to the level of mistreatment for our office. And most of the reports that come to us do meet that sort of threshold. We have very few that don't. Sometimes people are like, do people just report everything? You tell someone their sutures weren't good enough and they report you for mistreatment, and we haven't seen that happen. Less than 5% of our reports don't rise to the level of mistreatment. So that's the definition that we use. The most common types of mistreatment, we have everything sort of coded in our database. Deanna and I both are really sort of data focused in terms of like what patterns are we seeing, so that we can tailor our preventative work to best meet what exactly is happening. The most common types of mistreatment that are reported to us are public humiliation and verbal abuse, far and away. But that is what is reported to us. We believe, unfortunately, that mistreatment is underreported, not just here, but across everywhere, and not just medical learner mistreatment. All types of things are underreported. So we believe that we are getting sort of a small fraction of the incidents actually come through to Leo. And so, is public humiliation and verbal abuse the most prevalent type of mistreatment, or is it the sort of lowest stakes to report versus sexual harassment, discrimination based on race or disability or things like that might be a little more A, identifiable, and B, vulnerable? We don't know that at this point. We use our national surveys to try and compare, but I think we need a few more years of Leo data to be able to really get that strongly. But in terms of what's reported to us, more than half of our incidents are coded as either verbal abuse and or public humiliation. We do see a significant amount of gender and gender identity-based mistreatment, which is why we're focusing our next speaker series on that. So that's an example of a way that we use the sort of negative data to inform the proactive work. And I'll stop there. Deanna, say all the other things.
I think one of the things that we've been really trying to engage ourselves in while doing this work is trying to understand the root causes of mistreatment, right? And I think, we're a microcosm of we being, in our world, medical education, and mistreatment within medical education is really a microcosm of what we are seeing, in the probably national and global communities, right? Of like, what is acceptable in terms of the treatment of others. And if you look at education in general, if you look at higher education, if you look at professional education, medical education, I don't think it's a surprise to any of us that that we have issues of treatment of people, right? These institutions really come out of sort of legacies of white male privileged land owning people in terms of their thinking around what this looks like, what is this process, who's accepted into this process. And so it's required, I think, some really, really deep reflection around how do we at this like kind of smaller level have interventions and have, programs that can ultimately really attempt to change culture. And which is why we're really trying to think about like, what are the systems transformation pathways for us? Yes, there are like policy enhancements we can do, but really around changing culture, right? And I think that we are in the thick of it. I mean, it's not easy. There are generational differences in thinking about what is okay and what is not okay. And UNM, our School of Medicine, has engaged in, I would say, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 decades worth of some really successful diversity initiatives, right? So programs like BAMD, programs like all of the pipeline programs at the HSC Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion have really been successful at diversifying, certainly by gender identity, race, ethnicity, our medical student body. And so at the same time, though, we're not sort of proactively really thinking about what our inclusion efforts and initiatives going to look like, right? Like, what are we doing to change curricula? What are we doing to change policies and practices within the learning environment now that new groups of students, right? Like new first generation, literally, the first time in people's families ever being in an institution like this. What did the institution really do to say, hey, we can make changes so that way everybody really feels like they belong here? And that's the goal, right? Everybody should feel like they belong. And so I think that it's a real complex, set of challenges, that sort of are informed by really a millennia of complex issues of treatment of individuals, but we're really trying to, I think, ultimately have that type of complex understanding and analysis around root causes to ultimately inform the systems transformation work that has to happen.
So what I'm hearing you guys say is that your work is like very basic and boring, and there's not a lot to do, and you'll probably work yourselves into absolution in like 6 months. Like that's
exactly it.
Well, that sounds like way more than something as, I mean, obviously learner mistreatment is it's a very important issue to address, and that it's wonderful that this kind of office was born out of something so fundamentally icky and awful. It's really great that, something to really address all of these huge complex issues that are so important to something, and so it's such a strange cycle, because really everyone feeling like they belong shouldn't be that hard, and yet it is. Like the systems that are in place and the things that have been rooted in academic institutions for millennia, as you said, really are sometimes roadblocks to that. So I'm really glad that you guys exist. I think it's really wonderful work that you're doing. One more time, let's plug your website now that we know it off the top of our heads.
Yes, please visit us. Our website is also still a little bit under construction because Deanna and I have not, with all the other things we're doing, we haven't finished writing the content for it. big apologies to our administrative assistant, who's amazing, who's just waiting for us to do our jobs. But you can find us at go2.unm.edu/Leo. You can also always email us at hsc-leo@salud.unm.edu. That will come right to us. And I also just want to give a huge shout to the School of Medicine for not only creating this office, but creating it with actual resources. Like Diana said, this is not a uniquely UNM School of Medicine problem. This is a problem at every school of medicine across the country. And most schools of medicine, if they have anyone who's focused on learner mistreatment, it's typically a faculty member part-time. And we have the two of us who are full-time staff, as well as a third full-time staff member who's starting in July, plus 2 half-time staff members and another 10-hour-a-week staff member, plus affiliated faculty. As far as we can tell from our research, that's far and away the most robustly staffed office of its kind in the country. And so we are like really fortunate to be in a situation and have leadership who funded us and invested in us. You know, it's unfortunate that we were born out of this negative thing, but I think the School of Medicine, you know, is taking it really seriously and is really working to address it, not just on an incident by incident level, but is like really encouraging us to do this more systems work. And I think that is really unique and is very cool. So come hang out with us. We're interesting.
I couldn't agree more. So on your website, folks are able to access not only resources for how to report learner mistreatment or reach out to you if they feel they are being mistreated, but also they can access information around your speaker series and how to engage with you in that more proactive way. They can give kudos to their educators and, you know, lift each other up in that way. So lots of wonderful resources on the Leo website, which just one more time is go2.unm.edu/Leo. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been a really great conversation, and I'm really delighted to have spoken with you both about the depth and breadth of your work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we appreciate you and your work and helping to shine a light on Leo for this episode. Thank you.
Big time.
You bet.